Is this the video? Is this yours?
No, I don't think that's...
You've got your own, huh? Okay, well that's good. Do you realize you're being charged for this and you're getting no value? And as a fundraising scheme for the freedom parties, we will be charging for phone calls. 10 cents you extra, 15 cents. Sorry, it's exchange rate. Your socialist government is bad as mine.
No, ours is worse.
It's worse? Yeah. All right, let's take an unbiased survey. How many think that your socialist government might be worse? How many of you have friends in Omar Gaddafi's tent and night and rain and not? I can see why your bias is. Okay. A number of years ago, about 20 years ago, John Lilly did what he called sensory deprivation experiments. You may have read about them, where people were placed in floating tanks. It was a heavy saline solution, heavy salt solution in the water so you float. The tanks were very, very thoroughly covered, so no light could come in. The ears were muffled, and the eyes were closed. So you were literally deprived of all sensory contact with the world. Does anybody here remember those experiments? Remember reading about those in college? Now, what happened during the experiment? Anybody remember?
Well, William Drift's case, his muscles bulged out.
Mark hasn't changed any in for years. What he did is he put these people and he cut off all their senses. And what happens when you cut off your senses is this. Your brain starts playing. This is called hallucinating. Now, hallucination is the mind creating reality rather than perceiving it. Now, can you imagine what might happen? Visualize your theater, your mind is a theater. You're running premieres of Alfred Hitchcock, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and Walt Disney simultaneously. Now, this is a theater where basically anything is possible. Sensory deprivation is what makes this hallucination happen. Sleep is a form of sensory reduction, and it also makes it happen. This is hallucinating. The mind imagining the world instead of perceiving it. Sensory deprivation. Cut off from seeing, hearing, touching, or tasting. You do that and you will hallucinate. But you know, people selectively hallucinate every day. We hallucinate when we have a conversation with someone we love, we ignore the evidence of our senses, and we say, I know what you're going to say. Now, I know you've never done this. But you have a friend who's done this to you. You'll read a novel where person A will make some obscure gesture, and person B, who's far more insightful and probably an objective, looks deep into his eyes and knows the full meaning of the gesture, the full context of existence. This is called hallucinating. We hallucinate every day when we assume that we understand someone fully. Have you ever done this? You're really in love with somebody. You're having a conversation with them and they make a comment and you turn to them and you go, I never knew you thought that. Have you ever done that? You ought to. A good romantic experience ought to be a learning experience as you go along. You make it up as you go along. And the nice thing about good relationships is there's always more to learn. Bad relationships are relationships where someone says, I know what my wife will say if I bring this home. I know what my husband will say if I say this. Oh, really? Do you really? What you assume is that you know what they're going to say. That's hallucination. Now, you know you're hallucinating when you're paying attention to what's going on in here instead of out there. When you fail to examine sensory evidence, you don't check, verify, test things in the world perceivable to your senses, and that's the only world there is. When you fail to examine your beliefs about another person, your assumptions about another, your predictions about another one, and test it against the evidence. Sensory deprivation and hallucinating is an interesting experiment. But coming to your senses and using your mind, living with your sense channels fully open, that is a mind-altering experiment. Now you knew this, and you will still engage in sensory deprivation in conversation. You'll hear someone involved in a conversation with you. You know you're there because you can see your hand that you're looking at. And you're wondering where you're going to go later. And they'll say, did you hear what I said? And you go, oh yeah. Now I know you've never done this. But you have a friend who might have done it. One of the most important things we can learn as communicators is use our senses. They're valuable. The amount of information you can gather just by attending fully to touch, sight, and hearing is enormous. That's going to be a theme of a lot of what's going on here, is how to use the sensory evidence. Now, that's the metaphor I want you to remember during the whole workshop, sensory deprivation. Just like John Lilly's people in the floating tank. I want you to remember that every time you assume that you fully understand another person, you're getting what you deserve. Surprises when you didn't understand them at all. I know you've never done this yourself, but you probably had a friend who broke up with a member of the opposite gender they were romantically involved with. And they say, I don't understand. It came totally without warning. I was shocked. None of that comes totally without warning. None of it. If you're paying attention, you should have seen it all along. For example, the tax bags, the plane tickets. These are giveaways. Changing the locks on the doors. You can count on it. Sensory awareness is a cornerstone of good communication. But let's talk about, just for a little bit, in general terms, what I consider to be the elements of effective persuasion. What kind of qualities does somebody have who's good at persuading? I'm not just talking about political persuasion for a moment, but good at persuading anybody under any circumstance. 3 elements that you'll find in everybody who's effective at communicating. Without exception, they are fundamental. 3. 1. Effective communicators know specifically what outcome they're looking for. Now, I know you know that. Their communication is purposive, goal-directed. They know the outcome they're looking for. 2, they are flexible in their behavior. They are flexible in their behavior. They're able to generate lots and lots and lots of different behaviors to find out what kind of responses they get. And 3rd, they're able to refine their sensory awareness to notice when they're getting the responses they're looking for. Those are 3 elements that everybody who's effective, whether it's as a teacher, whether it's as a public speaker, a good public speaker has to know when he's losing the audience. An empty room is a good giveaway. A good teacher has to know when he's got a student who's actually made a new connection, because if you can feed that interest and curiosity, you're going to have one mind on your hands. They know the outcome they're looking for, because if you don't know where you're going in communication, you're not going to know when you got it. How many of you have had the following conversation? Let's call it an argument, because conversation isn't quite clean enough. You're arguing about an issue of politics. Unknown to you, this person has moved at a right angle to reality. They're off in ethics, explaining the morality of their political position. You get to ethics, they've moved to epistemology. Well, how do you know that that's really moral? How do you know what's valuable? You get to epistemology, they're down to metaphysics. By the time you hit metaphysics, you're saying, I thought we were talking about politics. At this point, they say, excuse me, I've got to get a beer. You'll find the argument has gone all over the board. They moved in their own direction. Well, there wasn't any goal in this communication. You just let it flow anywhere it went. Sort of like a drunken sailor dancing with a girl for a dime dance. It'll get somewhere, but it was somewhere no one intended. If you have those three characteristics, everything else here is a footnote to that. You know what you're looking for, if you're flexible in your behavior. Now, flexibility in your behavior is the part that's going to scare you. I know because it scares me. I do stuff that used to drive my friends crazy. Mary Lou knows the kind of stuff I would do.
Still does.
All right, still does. I remember, I sell automobiles for a living. That's one of the things I do for a living. I sell a Suzuki. I had a manager who would not accept terms that to me were perfectly reasonable. They're reasonable because A, it was in profit, B, I had a commission coming, and C, I was tired and wanted to go home. Those were the three key elements of the sale that night. The desk was so high, I watched it, I couldn't get through to him. He wanted to give the paperwork to somebody else. So I finally stood on the desk, looked down at him and said, "The Lord God in His wisdom wants you to accept this deal. Be healed." He sort of mildly filled out a complete buyer's order and sat there. We went through contracts, and I was getting ready to leave, and I said, "I will see you tomorrow." Can I see you, Michael? Sure, what's the matter? Everything all right at home? I said, yeah. Feeling good? Your attitude good? Yeah. Why did you do that? And I looked at him and I said, I figured that something unusual might catch your attention. I didn't think you were listening to me. He says, "Oh, caught my attention." Caught my attention. I said, "You're not mad at me, are you?" "No, not mad at you." I left and went home, and the next day everybody had heard it. He said, "This is true." I said, "Yeah." Within a week, 2 other people tried it to get a deal. True story.
Did it work for them?
No. No, one thing about a surprise, it only works once. You ever have your kids tell a joke to you and you laugh at it? And they say the same damn joke again and again and again. "Hey, Dad, look at this." "Yeah, that's real funny, son." Don't clean your room. Now, if you got these three skills, you know the outcome you want? You're able to generate a lot of variety in your behavior, and you've refined your sensory awareness where you notice when you're actually getting the responses you're looking for. You ever seen that somebody win an argument, the other person clearly acknowledged that, yeah, you're right, and the person keeps driving the point home? You ever seen that? You know, these are people who can't take yes for an answer. We've all done that. "No, I want unconditional surrender. I don't want agreement. I want you to grovel. I want you to look to me and say, how could I have been so small and shallow and not accepted your viewpoint? A hair shirt, would that help?" "Well, it depends." We want a little bit of that. If you have these three skills, you're going to find that you can just change what you're doing until you get the responses you want. Just change what you're doing. If what you're doing isn't working, do something. And that's obvious, right? Write it down. Use the person you're talking to as your standard of judgment as to how effectively you're communicating. All you have to do is keep acting differently until you get the look and the sound and the touch. So they're acting the way you want them to. And you'll say, "Now I'm doing it right." I know that I'm effectively persuading someone when they've written me a check, when they've bought the automobile. A teacher knows that he or she has communicated when the test answers come back correct and original, better than they were taught. That's how you know what to do. Now I'm going to give you a sentence that's going to blow your mind with its cerebral proportions, metaphysical implications, ponderous timing, and it's this. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. You like what you're getting? Now, you say that's obvious. That is, it is very obvious, isn't it? How many times have you been in the following argument? If I told you once, I told you 100 times. Well, it didn't work the last 99 times. What makes you think reality has changed? Shit, let's change causality. It'll work. It doesn't work that way. Now, if what you're doing doesn't work in communication, try anything else. What do you have to lose? You've already failed miserably. Well, that's right, failing miserably is okay. I fail miserably hundreds of times a day. There's nothing wrong with it. It's called experimentation. It's called trying a lot of different things. Scientific method, that's another word for it. Nothing wrong with failing. But if it doesn't work, just do something else. If what you're doing doesn't produce the results you want, try another approach. Oh, I know what you're saying. No. That's not the Canadian way. No. If something doesn't work, I yell louder. I talk longer. I'm going to prove I can hypnotize them boringly into believing what I believe. It'll be exciting like I am. Now, in the mathematics of life, you are the variable. And for those of you who don't know, the variable controls the equation. Remember the equation? 2 over 4 equals 3x. You remember that? The variable, whatever's filled in there, determines the outcome of the equation. So if you want a different outcome, you want a different equation, change your actions. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but it's not my fault. He's not understanding me. If only he were more rational, such as myself. If only he were more understanding, like me. If only she were peaceful, elegant, like all my friends, who are slowly moving away into other service. Then they would understand. So we're like the blame. Blaming is a great game. You get to be right and you get to fail and you get to feel good about it. God, that's fun. You see, doing something dumb once is just a learning experience. Doing it regularly is a bad habit. You ever done that? You've used an argument to try and convince somebody. It doesn't work with that person. You go, well, maybe someone with a better mind. So you talk to someone with a better mind, it doesn't work with them. And then you try the same argument on the third person. By the fourth person, you ought to say, reality is trying to teach me something here, such as use another argument. This one isn't formulated well. Now this seems obvious. Remember the case of the Purloined Letter? Edgar Allan Poe story. Guy steals this letter. He runs home. The cops are hot-footing it over to his place. They're going to get his rear end and throw him in the pokey. He says, I'm trying to hide this. So he takes the letter and he puts it on the letterboard, right along with the other letters. They tear up the floorboard, rip the carpet apart, tear up the chairs, and here it is in plain sight. And they leave it. Why? Because he hid it in an obvious place. Obvious means overlooked. Whenever you see something, it's obvious that I have to treat someone I care about better. But we do the rottenest things to people who are close to us. Would you call a stranger a shithead? No? Why do you call your kid a shithead? Well, I love him. Call a stranger a shithead, you'll never see him again. It doesn't matter. But your kid, you're going to see tomorrow. And he might take it seriously and believe you. So, obvious means overlooked. Remember you think something's really obvious? Now, some of the best things I ever learned were obvious. How many of you read or you may have heard the tape? It was a debate called Debate 1984, Socialism or Capitalism. How many of you read that? I want to tell you about a part of the debate that's going to, you're going to say, oh, I knew that. It was obvious. You didn't write it down. There was a debate between Dr. John Ridpath and Dr. Leonard Peikoff on the pro-capitalist side, and Dr. Jill Vickers and Dr. Jerry Kaplan on the socialist scum-sucking, running dog lackey of socialism. I believe in balancing my presentation. Anyway, they're having a debate about, which is philosophically the valid system, socialism or capitalism. Anyway, Dr. Ridpath is an assistant professor of history and intellectual history at York University. Very bright fellow, as far as I can tell. Well, during the debate, Dr. Ridpath has one of these great lines that I absolutely have to share with you. He says that this was the 5th year in a row debating the socialists. He says he's totally had it with them. Why can't he get a scholarly, philosophical debate with the socialists? Every time he gets euphemisms, he gets sarcasms, ad hominem arguments, vagueness, and evading the point. Do you remember when he said that? This is a rational man. He's bright. He's well educated. But he keeps doing the same thing that isn't accomplishing his purpose. If what you're doing doesn't work, do something else. Here's a bright man who kept doing something that didn't work as a way of life. And he'll do it next year, I'll bet. How do I know that? Because I've done it, and you've done it. I've said it to you, and I've said it to you loud and clear. I don't want to go to dinner with so-and-so. I hate them. They're boring. And you've got dinner plans, and you go anyway. Well, loud and clear didn't work. Maybe soft and fuzzy would work. Maybe brief and to the point. I'll kill them if I see them again. If your complaining doesn't work, very rational approach, complain louder. Longer. That's always a great way. Your partner will love you for it. Thank you. I know you love me enough to really bitch and moan for hours. If that doesn't work, I know sulking will soon follow. Now, if our argument doesn't convince a friend, we expand on it. You ever do this? You don't get your point through and you go, well, must be a little density here. Maybe if I can make this simpler, I'll use baby words. I know you've never done it, but you have a friend. I've done it. I've done it. And every time I catch myself, I go, what a wonderful learning experience. I'm not going to go, you screwed up again, because that would be wrong. I say, well, a wonderful learning experience, and I try and move on. If something doesn't work, you get more of it. Now, this is the American way of doing it, and I know it's been imported into Canada. If you hit a rock with a hammer and it doesn't break, hit it harder. You get a bigger hammer. Buy a smaller rock. Borrow a hammer. You get 3 people with hammers. 4 people with smaller rocks. More hammers. Longer. Set up a government program. Subsidize it. Get that second rock until it breaks. Tax credit for a rock breaker. This is really obvious. Now let me ask you for some examples of where when you're doing something and it doesn't work, you do it longer or louder or harder. Give me some examples either from your own personal encounter or politics. I'd like an example of this.
Working.
Working. Yeah, right. Boy, I haven't gotten anywhere in this job. I guess I'll put in the extra hours. Maybe that'll work. The boss is good. What a shit. Schmuck fell for it again. That's true. Work longer. That doesn't work.
Getting the kids to finger?
Yeah, getting the kids. I'm not going to tell you again. Oh, yes, you will. That's how my mother's. She's still hoards, you know. That's been years. Matter of fact, it's still a habit. I come in, hi, Mom. I'm not going to. No, but that's. I'm old now. Older anyway. How many of you have, on other occasions, done the same thing? Does that make sense? Have you done it before? And you'll do it again? Louder and longer? That's the philosophy. It's a bad philosophy. What really doesn't work, do anything else. This is obvious. Well, let me give you an example from the world we know about. Government programs. Welfare. We're throwing dollars at poverty. You know, this is like those Farm Aid and the Apple. What was the aid? What was the first one? Live Aid. You know, boy, we're throwing all these dollars at problems. We're going to knock off poverty. We're going to knock off hunger, right? And they see it didn't work. We need a new solution. Oh, I've got it. More dollars. Is that true? Boy, that poverty program didn't work. Get another one. Look, pour more money. Hire some more bureaucrats. That'll work. Time tested. Isn't that true? Well, that's true. Jobs. This government jobs program didn't work. We'll spend more money. Give more money to them. Get them chauffeured to and from the unemployment line. Think that'll work. Aid to businesses. And you know what kind of businesses need aid? Slimy government stuck up to the bureaucrat's business. You know, the foreign boils of the world. Hank Reardon wouldn't show up at a bureaucrat dinner if they paid him. Foreign Boyle would wear a tux. Medical assistance. We had, how many read the book called Losing Ground? If you haven't read it, it's an interesting book. Laissez-faire Books offers it. Losing Ground is a book about welfare programs in the United States. Have they actually assisted the poor? And in fact, the bottom line on all this stuff is things are worse than when they started. Well, if they're going to be worse than while they were started, why didn't we save all the money? If they had problems spending it, I'll volunteer. I could use it. You want to eliminate the poverty problem? Look, if more bucks eliminated the poverty problem, it would have been solved by now. Because look at all the billions we put into it. The only real people who are digging the program are the people administering it, who are white, middle class, white, male, college-educated people who want job security. These are people supporting the program because the program isn't working. Now, that's an obvious thing. What you're doing doesn't work, do something else. I know you know that. You're going, Michael, I know this shit. Why are you telling me this again? Well, it didn't work the first time. So let me give you a guideline about communicating. I want you to write this down. It's very important. Very important. The meaning of your communication is the response you get. The meaning of your communication is the response you get. There are no stubborn listeners. There are only incompetent speakers. There are no closed-minded audiences. There are only speakers who fail to be resourceful. There are no resistant people. There are only inflexible communicators. It is your responsibility to be understood. And if you're not heard, it is not their responsibility, it is yours. It is not their stubbornness, it's your refusal to try it away. It's not their pig-headedness, it's your kosher attitude. Every outcome in communication is a statement about your behavior. If you're not getting the response you want, do something else. If you did nothing from this whole workshop but learn that, you have become enormously resourceful. I've done that tons of times. You ever have an argument with somebody and it's not working out right? Try turning around and say, this isn't working out. You be me, I'll be you, okay? Now that's totally ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, there's no reason to do something like that, right? Ask them to defend your viewpoint and try and convince you. Shake your hand and say, thank you very much, you convinced me. Walk off. You know what? Sometimes it works. I've done that. You want to try that? Sometimes try it. Say, this isn't working out. You sit in my chair. You be me. Okay? Now you present my ideas more effectively. I'm obviously not as good at presenting ideas as you would be. I'll be you, and I'll listen in. They will present your ideas, I'll bet you money, in terms that they understand, in terms they agree with. They'll convince themselves. No Gestalt technique. Now, in any communication, you can either justify your behavior or vary it until you get what you want. You can either get righteous or get resourceful. I know what you're thinking. I'd rather feel righteous than be effective. I'd rather be right than be able to actually communicate my ideas. Well, I got news for you. That's a reference to failures. If you want to walk off and feel smug, knowing that you're rational and they're stupid, you're thoughtful and they're ignorant, pig-headed, gravy-sucking, status pig looters, you can convince yourself of that. You really can. I know that everybody here has done this at least once. You've walked off knowing that you presented your viewpoint right and knowing they failed to hear you. I know you felt that because I have felt it. And I've checked with so many audiences and they've told me. It's a normal, natural reaction to rationalize, to justify our behavior to ourselves, because nobody wants to feel like they're wrong. Isn't that true? You can catch Al Capone was interviewed in prison. Why did you turn to crime? Necessity, he said. Necessity. Charlie Manson, why did you do it? Someone had to do it. Oh. You just got the short straw? Now, from time to time, and this is something that people in this room will do, most of you, how many people here have at least a bachelor's degree? Okay? How many have at least a master's level or a doctorate? Okay. How many graduated from the University of Hard Knocks? I always say that because they give them the test before they give you the instructions. One of the problems you have if you're a very thoughtful person, if you're intelligent, and you'll discover this in politics, is the brighter you are, the more difficult it is. Because you'll assume people understand some stuff, and they won't. You'll assume that, oh, everybody knows that, and they didn't. You'll say, well, you've read about this, and they'll go, they'll look like those Hare Krishnas on the street. You get that little vacant look and you go, uh-oh, I think I slid one by them there. One of the problems with being very bright is that from time to time you're going to make up a list of things that you're going to refuse to do. A list of behaviors that you won't allow yourself to engage in. You're going to call this list personal dignity. You're going to call this list maturity. Oh, that's immature. I wouldn't stoop to that. I would. You're going to call this list being principled. It is principled to present my viewpoints in this way. None but a whim-worshipping, muscle mystic. Or used any other way. Oh, I know it doesn't work, so it can't be based in reality, but I am being principled. And you can walk off either smug or with the results you want. That's obvious. You'll give yourself another word. You'll say, I can't do this because of character. I have too much character to engage in that sort of or my favorite, consistency forbids me to do this. Don't misunderstand. I'm not denigrating character or consistency or being principled. Those of you who know me know that to be true. Those of you who don't will discover. What I'm saying is we use these as excuses for failure, as excuses for not attempting another approach of persuading people. You're going to use these words or other high-sounding phrases. Whenever you restrict your behavior, whenever you limit your options, whenever you think that there are things that you just can't do, you lose your edge. You cut your odds of achieving your goal. Now, this is just another excuse for failure. If you're looking for a way to fail, this will do as well as anything else. Of course I couldn't convince him. I was principled. Well, of course I wouldn't stoop to that kind of bickering. A principled person couldn't dream of doing what you're asking me to do. Now, if you're looking for a way to fail, this is a good way. Give your behaviors, your list. Now, how many of you have a list of things that you wouldn't allow yourself to do to communicate an idea? I've done it. Come on, no lying. How many of you would not shout at somebody in a crowded room where everybody else is talking quietly? Wouldn't do it. That's the behavior you would engage in. How many wouldn't use a swear word to catch your attention? Come on. I'm not saying you should, I'm just giving you an example. I'm not recommending it. I'm not recommending it. Matter of fact, most of the time it doesn't work, but I'm giving that as an example. How many of you say to yourself, no, I wouldn't go to church with them to hear out their religious beliefs? Raise your hand if you wouldn't. Come on. I know you. I'm mind reading, it's hallucinating. Every time you make a list of things that you wouldn't do, you're limiting your behavior. You're forbidding yourself an opportunity to achieve your goals. Now, if we know anything about business, we know that resourcefulness wins in the long run and the short run of business. I've seen more businesses put together on a shoestring and some good work in because the owner was willing to be resourceful. Now, in cybernetics, there's a law called requisite variety. Anybody ever heard of the law? No? Okay. Requisite. No, that's all right. Not everybody reads Norbert Weiner. I got to tell you Norbert Weiner's story. You'll like this. Norbert Weiner is a guy who invented cybernetics. He's a mathematician, a very, very bright guy. Weiner one day is walking across campus at MIT. A friend of his stops him for an intense intellectual conversation. They finish, and he says to his friend, he says, excuse me, could you tell me what direction I was going when you stopped me? And the professor looks at him and says, you're going that way. He says, oh good, I had breakfast. That's a true story. That's a true story. I've done that before. That's why those kind of stories to me are, you're so involved in what you're doing that you totally lose track. My wife looks at me and says, I don't understand. She says, you can remember what John Stuart Mill said, you quote people like Tertullian, and you can't remember how to get the tomatoes how. That's why I drive with you. You know how to get there. You're not going to waste your time with the esoterics up there. Anyway, Norbert Weiner invented something called cybernetics. And in it they have what they call the law of requisite variety. It goes like this. This is a very important law, so be sure and remember this. It says, in any connected, interactive system, the element with the widest variety, with the widest range of variety, will be the controlling element. All right. Now, this means that the greater your variety of behavior, the more choices of action you have available to you when communicating or when thinking, the more ability you have to influence the encounter. This is true in sales. You ever do this? Have you ever had anybody try and sell life insurance to you? They never do that with cancer patients, but usually they choose what they consider to be an open market. And you'll sit down and they'll say, and don't you think this is a good idea after presenting it? And you go, I'll think about it. And you'll say, I know you think about it. And I know you wouldn't think about it unless you were really interested, would you? Well, no. Can I assume that you give this very careful consideration? And you go, well, yeah. Now, you're not just saying this to put me off, are you? And you go, no, you lie. Well, just to clarify in my mind, could you tell me what it is you have to think over? Is it the, and they'll go right to the list of stuff. And they'll say, well, then isn't it clear that you should act now? And you go, but I don't have the money. That's all right, borrow it. Rates might go up. No matter what objection you have, if that salesperson is an effective salesperson, they have an answer to it, don't they? That's their job, is to get results. You're not paid for good intentions and a nice art. You're paid for results. In business, Mark can have his doors open all day and all night at City Lights, and if nobody shows up, he's got no money in the cash register. That's reality. Reality is if you're a trial attorney and you keep losing cases, you're going to have cobwebs on the door. That's reality, isn't it? Reality is if you're a teacher and your students engage in sleep learning regularly during class, you're not going to get tenure. This is true in therapy. I love this. How many of you have taken classes in psychology? Have you done it? When I was at the University of Arizona, in Tucson, Arizona, I went to every form of psychotherapy I could think of to learn these different techniques. Gestalting how you talk to a friend in a chair. The friend wasn't there, the chair was. Right? And then you trade places and be your friend and talk back to yourself, who isn't in the chair but was. And this is called therapy. Sterling in this episode. We would go off to a state mental institution, and they got these people who are catatonic. Catatonics are like the ultimate in like unmotivated. They sit there, you can leave their arm like that, and they'll sit there for a long, 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 long time. I don't mind that, everybody's got their own pleasures. But you walk in and everybody goes, shh, and you go, what's the matter? What, do you think you're going to disturb them? These guys are wearing white coats, and the catatonics have got them persuaded you shut up when you walk in the room. They don't even say thank you, they just sit there quietly. If I were a therapist, and we all are to a certain extent, to the extent we love our friends and our families, then I would do anything but what they've been trying to do with these catatonics. You want to get a response out of a catatonic? Walk up to your catatonic, stomp on his foot, he'll come out of it. Now that isn't therapy, but it'll open up the, hey, cut that out. Hey, wow, I'm glad you can communicate. Talk to me. Right there, go right back into it. You got a chance to talk to them. That might be one way to be resourceful. Obviously, everything these people have learned and tried these catatonics didn't work, did it? So they should have been doing anything else. Matter of fact, if you ask them, they got these volumes of papers showing that you can't communicate with catatonics. Right? Well, if that's true, then why are they being paid to treat them? My theory of therapy is that the patient can never get well and should keep coming once a week. $60 a crack, I can look good. This is true in sports. In football, if you watch football, doesn't it? Every so often you'll see some garbage play where you go, and that was a Statue of Liberty, double reverse, flip over, flea flicker pass. Right? And you go, what the hell was that? The touchdown! Why? Because it was resourceful. Nobody expected it, right? That's equally true in boxing. You know, hi, would you like some brain damage? Yeah, I'll box. What do you want to end up like? I want to end up like Ali. Recommend battery. Resourceful people in these professions win. Because they've got more moves. Public speaking. How many of you have ever done public speaking? I have people tell me, boy, I'm scared of public speaking. I like public speaking. It's really a lot of fun. It really is. Especially if you treat it like a game. Every so often you're going to get someone who's going to give you a number. Oh, I love it when people do a number on me. Mary Lou just absolutely, I like it. I used to give public recruiting efforts. We did Alberta. And I had somebody who was going to really let me have it. I was talking about gun control. And this woman says, yeah, the reason so many women are being raped is the guys have guns. Right? The guy's going, stick them up and drop your door. Now get them. Get them. I'll tell you a story. This is a true story. I was involved in speech writing for a lady named Meredith Little who ran for county reporter in Tucson, Arizona. She was a feminist. She was the head of the National Organization for Women. I went and gave a talk to their group. Now, I knew that they were going to vote for Morris Udall, who was the Democrat race. I knew that I had no chance of winning any votes. So what I have to lose, right? I couldn't leave with any less votes than I entered with. Because 0 minus 0 is 0. Good mathematics, I knew I stood a chance. I knew the Republicans who thought that women ought to keep their bread in the oven and their buns in bed was not going to relate well to this group. I gave a talk about gun control, and it went sort of like this. I did the same thing when we did the recruiting with this woman who said guns are why so many women are being raped. A little bit like that. So I said, you know what the rape rate is in Pima County, which is Tucson, Arizona area? And it was astronomically high. It's a university town. And the reason it is because we have a lot of women going back into the scholastic market. They had a marriage that didn't work out, they had a job that was a dead-end job, and they decided, I'm going to get an education so that I have a chance to rise in the world. They go back to school, and they don't have a lot of money, they're working at a part-time job, and they live in these crummy little houses that have locks made by toothpick companies. Right? You can kick the door in by sneezing. It's not safe for a woman to go through these areas, and so the rape rate is unbelievably high. And I said, I wonder what the average rape rate would be in Pima County. If the average rapist knew that the average woman attending the average University of Arizona had an average inexpensive handgun with average inexpensive bullets, it would blow his average head clean off when he entered without knocking. Upwardly mobile, rich women don't need inexpensive handguns. Laws that prevent and forbid inexpensive handguns say that poor women get raped and rich women get to speak ill of them. Inexpensive handguns are the only way of protection that poor women have. Recommending that poor women not be allowed to protect themselves is sexist and evil. And what is more, it shows a lack of compassion for any human dignity. It went over very well with the group, right? And I asked Morris Udall to take a stand and say, let's legalize inexpensive handguns. Right? He was one of the architects of the gun control laws. I picked up about 7, 8 votes there. After my speech, I said, thank you very much. And I went back to get, I don't know, they had some Coke or whatever. Not the blood, not the... This is not making, this is 76, we were a while back then. And this woman comes over, and do you remember in the days of heavy feminism, when the women were wearing clothes that made them look really unattractive? Right, the guys were too, but I didn't care, I was just a guy. Right? And this woman says, come here, I want to show you something. I said, sure. She's wearing jeans, and she's wearing one of these blue, work shirts, those kinds. And she started tightening it up. And actually, I went right to the gutter, I figured, boy, what a fun meeting. This is going to be what I thought feminists were really a little sort of like anti-male gender. And I said, hey, this is going to be really neat. So she gets her shirt hiked up and pulls out a .357 Magnum. She says, see this? I said, uh-huh. She said, I want to tell you a story. I said, go ahead. I'm all ears. And she said, I was hitchhiking the other day down 22nd Street, which is a main artery in Tucson, Arizona. And I got picked up by a fellow who was going to give me a ride. I said, yeah. And I got in the car, and I said, could you drop me out to Swan Road? The guy said, sure. So he drives past Swan Road, which is an intersection. She said, excuse me, you missed my turnoff. And he said, shut up, bitch, and you won't get hurt. And I said, what'd you do? I knew the story was getting good. She said, oh, it was easy. She says, I took out my, and she had it wasn't a Smith & Wesson, it was one of the other brands, but we used Smith & Wesson. I took out my .357, she picked up, it was a big pistol. I mean, look at just heavy, 4 or 5 pounds. Picked it out, double action, click. She pulled the trigger back and put it against his head and said, pull over, asshole. Which he did. See, this is called Smith & Wesson co-therapy. He pulled over, and she said, get out of the car. Right? And this is on, cars going, by. She's standing there with a gun. And she says to the guy, run. I might miss. You thought Jesse Owens was fast. This guy was white and he could have been black. He was so fast. She let the air out of his tires, broke his car key off, and did some other damage to the car. And then walked back to Swan Road. And the woman looked at me and she said, you know what that means? I said, it means to be a very careful driver. And she said it means that as long as men know that women won't tolerate sexual abuse, men will be very careful. And men will be a little more respectful of women. I told this story to the women in the audience who had told me that anybody calling against gun control was a rapist or anti-woman. And we finished this encounter, which was in Alberta. And after the meeting, this woman, and if I reminded you of who she was, you might remember her. The woman was a lesbian, and she had a girlfriend with her. And we went over to the fellow's house in Stan's house. Went over to Stan's house, and we were talking, and I said, let me ask you a question. I said, what's that? I said, what do you think of what I said to you? And she said, what do you mean what I think of you? You convinced me. This is a close subject. I didn't take a long time to convince her, and I didn't have to document it. I gave her an anecdote that changed her mind. That is a matter of being resourceful. Not just with me, but with other. I've seen speakers. I remember Bobby Kennedy was giving a speech when he was running for president of the United States. He was in Omaha. And he was going on and on as the Kennedys do, in their own inimitable way. And he's got a heckler in front. You Kennedys are all bastards. Go back to where you came from. We don't want you here. And he's competing against Hubert Humphrey at the time, who is the Democratic frontrunner. And Kennedy's going, and I believe that we need new programs. We need a new agenda. We need an opportunity to see the future with new possibilities. And this fellow keeps it up. And finally, in frustration, Bobby turns to Ethel, his wife, and says, Ethel, I have bad news. It's not going to be unanimous in Oklahoma. Whatever. Now, good. That's what it means to be resourceful. Allow yourself to be willing to do that. That's what requisite variety is. Does that make sense? Does that seem like a sensible thing to do? If what you're doing doesn't work, do something else. Whoever's the most resourceful usually wins. That's very obvious. You're probably saying to yourself, I paid for this. Of course you did. Because that's one of the things we forget. And then we start laying labels on it like character, principle, so on. Now, because of requisite variety, you're going to want to program yourself to look for strategies and formats that you find useful. When you hear somebody present an idea, instead of sitting around and picking up their argument, this is wrong and that's wrong and he didn't do this as well as I would have. He obviously didn't use my same argument. See what response that person was getting. If that person was getting a good response, add that style of presenting your viewpoint to your repertoire skills. Program to look for where they're useful. Learn them. Don't try to pick them apart and find out where they're going to break down. Learn them. Use them. You'll find out where they break down. And when you do, when you see an area where it won't work, you're going to do something else. And that's obvious too. Now, a good test of how effective your persuasive technology is this. A good test of how well and how effective you're persuading. How easily does it work, and how fast does it work? Mary Lou convinced that fellow by asking him one question. Seems to me prostitution consists of two things: free enterprise and sex. Which one are you against? That was brief, it was to the point, and it worked, didn't it? Because you made a new connection in that person's mind. He can never go back to thinking the same stupid thoughts he thought, because that's in his mind forever. A good test for how effective that was is it worked quickly and it worked easily. So if what you're doing is hard and laborious, maybe there's a faster way of doing it. Maybe there's a smoother way of doing it. Now, sooner or later, you're going to encounter someone you won't be able to persuade. It's a fact. If you don't meet someone like this, you're not talking to enough people. And when you meet this person, I want you to ask yourself two questions. What did I try? And then what else did I try? Take notes after you go home. What did I try with the person? What else did I try? And then you're going to ask yourself questions that I know are going to occur to you later. Even as I'm talking to you now, during lunch, you're going to say, that was a really good point Michael made. You're going to say, that's the question I'm going to ask myself afterwards. What didn't I try? And what else didn't I try? Because those are the things you're going to want to try next time. Now, you're going to want, in persuasion, you don't have to convince people of every single issue. You're going to look for leverage in persuasion. It's like Archimedes, give me a place to stand and I'll move the planet. We're pretty familiar, most of us, with Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. It says basically 80% of the results are the product of 20% of the efforts. You've heard it. We've all heard it at some point. If you haven't heard it, you've heard it now. So someone says, you've heard it? You go, I was there. I wasn't hallucinating. My sensory channels were clean and open. You can take a snowball at the top of a mountain, pack it right, and roll it down the hill and knock off one good-sized village. That's leverage. It's not friendly, but it's leverage. Steve Jobs told a story about a computer that I really like. It seems that some years ago, some scientist was trying to determine which in the animal kingdom were the fastest animals in terms of traversing space. How fast was the dolphin through water? How fast was the cheetah? Well, it turned out after all their testing, they determined that the fastest animal in the kingdom was the condor, that it could literally travel faster, further than any other animal. Until some bright young scientist said, well, excuse me, what about a man on a bicycle? And it turned out the man on the bicycle was even faster than the condor. You know, computers are just bicycles for your mind. Technology that helps you get the results you want faster. Crunching numbers swifter than you can do it yourself. Persuasive technology is just a bicycle for your mind, a way to enable you to get from disagreement A to agreement B faster or smoother. That's all the technology of persuasion is. I'll tell you a story that you won't like, but we'll tell you about leverage, and then we're going to take a break. It's a story of Ayatollah Khomeini. The Shah was in power at the time. The Ayatollah Khomeini was in exile in France, which, if you've ever been to France, is as good a place to be exiled as any place I can think of. You'll want to go home. Cassette recorders are cheap. You can buy hundreds of them for very little money, right? You buy one of those little cassette players for what, $30, $25, $20? Ayatollah Khomeini recorded 2 religious messages, very emotional, motivational religious messages, and made hundreds of copies of that cassette. I'm talking about 2 30-minute talks. Made copies of it and smuggled them into Iran. Now, most of the people in Iran are illiterate, and judging from their behavior in bringing Ayatollah back, stupid too. These cassettes were passed around to people with cassette players, and it's easier to smuggle a cassette player than a car bomb. So we know they got around in the Mideast. Person after person heard these 2 tapes, and as a consequence, 2 tapes and little cassette recorders, he leveraged his way in and the Shah's way out. He totally changed that society with 60 minutes worth of talk and leverage. I want you to think about that. If you could give 60 minutes worth of speech and change a whole civilization, move it backwards to the 14th century in his case, or forward to the 21st century, and in our case, that is persuasive power. That's leverage. When you communicate, it's very important to realize that you're looking for the leverage move. Amplifiers do it to sound. Machines do it to strength. Earth movers do things that would take 100 men with 100 shovels, 100 years to do. And they do it in hours, even under the instruction of bureaucrats. Let's let's take 10 minutes. I know what's going to happen during break because I can foretell the future. What's going to happen is this. You're going to say to yourself, some of this was obvious, some that I already knew, and some that I can use. Put more into this, I can use this category, and you'll find out where I was wrong, and you'll find out where you can find some useful stuff. Let's take a break, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. We will hand them out. Would you hand them out to everybody that's raised hands and isn't too offensive? That was an arid underarm joke.
Very dry.
Yes, it's a very bad joke. I don't have to make money.
Michael, are we going to get into definitions of left and right later on?
No, we're going to get into definitions of left behind and right away. No, I don't think you can get a legitimate definition of left and right. You know, the term historically left was from French Parliament. The left side was the non-monarchist. That's actually where the term left-wing came from. No, it's actually from the French just before they started lopping heads off. The British are always claiming credit. Always claiming credit. Were they all handed out? You got any left over? No? Could you give me one? I was going to go over it for a second. By the way, we almost got this Yankee custom drawn out. This is subversive stuff. No, that's true. Robert just told me that the fellow was highlighting my article on political cross-dressing, how to get Congress left and right, asking whether this fellow was in Canada for a lecture. No, this is your friend. I don't believe in borders.
Anybody got one that they can clear?
I think there's one coming in. We got some more coming in. Here. Yeah. And that was back. That is the previous we used. Thank you.
Does anybody have an extra pen?
Anyone have an extra pen? Let's bid the price up. Okay. Oh, the market mechanism. Okay. Okay. Now, as you may have heard, we almost got this sucker yanked. Damn it, we failed. Your local customs people felt that the first page was particularly worth reading. This is Robert. Is this gospel? Is this true?
That's for true.
Yeah, they were highlighting in red, or in
And they're actually mapping on to customs to determine whether this stuff is acceptable for entry into the country.
Absolutely. You know, I really want you to know that this may never come again.
That's a collector's item. We have photocopiers.
You do? Uh-oh, photocopiers and blue jeans, and there goes Russia.
I had trouble getting Freedom Party literature into the United States.
There's a reason for that. And then there's, if sometime, not during the workshop, if you haven't read the articles, I think you'll find the author's particularly a nice person, swell guy, good dancer, fun partier, modest to a fault, modest to all its faults. Now, 3 articles in a row. One's How to Get Congress Left and Right, which is the first article I wrote for Reason Magazine. It's on political communication with a rather interesting technique that I use called political cross-dressing. The second one's called The Late Great Libertarian Macho Class. This technique is guaranteed to alienate anyone you want to. And it was used regularly in the early days of the freedom movement. I'm not recommending it, I'm critiquing it. Third article, the final part of the first 2 is on the 3rd page. Third article is an article called The Militant Mentality. I think you'll find some elements there in some of your friends. I know no one here will do this, but maybe you have friends who might, on another occasion, have done it. On the next page is a photocopy out of a book by Richard Bandler and John Grinder called Transformation. We will be going over this eye-accessing cues. Don't worry about it. That is not really a happy face. This is what Nixon looks like when he's trying to figure out how to lie about the tapes. And on the last page, there is a bibliography. And I want you to remember that this may never again be allowed into Canada, so treasure it closely, photocopy it thoroughly. You're welcome. Incidentally, you're welcome to photocopy any of the articles for as many prints as you want. I got copyright for them, but I don't care. You know, as far as I'm concerned, public domain. You may use them as you see fit. Please do cite said author. The said author will not also be allowed into Canada again. I got to see it. Mary will be driving across the border. You got anything in your trunk? That'll be me. On the last page, there is a bibliography. You'll notice no books on politics. There's a reason for that. That's that you probably have all the reading lists you need in books for politics. If you don't, I will ask the Freedom Party people up here to photocopy my old reading list, which is just a brief 132 books you can read in your spare time, like I did. These particular books deal with persuasion. On the left side, I want you to highlight the following books. Highly worth getting. The ones that I recommend here, all of them are good. But the ones you definitely want to get is book number 1, Frogs and the Princes. Super book. It's called Frogs and the Princes. It's a book about communicating efficaciously. And these people developed, Dan and Grinder developed what's called neuro-linguistic programming. I used a lot of the technology. As a matter of fact, I found out that I was doing a lot of stuff they were doing in a different area, in a different arena. I had somebody say, "You're not taking neuro-linguistic programming, Michael, you're doing it." I said, "What's that?" They said, "You don't know?" I said, "No, I've never heard of it." And I started reading their stuff, and they're just doing it in a different area than I'm doing, communication skills. Skip the second book unless you're really into stodgy writing. Scoot on down, it really is. The book that's by Robert Dilts called Neuro-Linguistic Programming 1. Tough reading, highly worth having. Brilliant book. Neuro-Linguistic Programming is basically designed to teach people how to use their brains in a more user-friendly fashion. The brain is not user-friendly, in case you didn't know. Your brain does not do what you want it to do. It does what you tell it to do. It's like a computer. You ever do that? You program it? Stupid computer! It still isn't acting right. It's over there going, stupid carbon-based unit. Now, scooting on down, the book by David Gordon called Therapeutic Metaphors, Helping Others Through the Looking Glass. That is a very, very brilliant piece of work that you'll find absolutely critical in communication. Matter of fact, I've got a whole section today on metaphors. And some of you are going to ask that important question, what's a metaphor? I'm not use a pun, go to jail. Okay. Scooting on down, reframing. Grinder and Bammer, called Reframing Neuro-Linguistic Programming and the Transformation of Meaning. Don't be impressed by the words. The books are very readable. They're fun. These guys are funnier than most stand-up comedians. They're really fun books. You could literally read it while drinking wine. Matter of fact, it may make more sense if you read it. Lots of wine. Now, let's see, I'll scoot on down. Other side, the typed in, those are the ones that I typed in. Using your brain for change, get that book. Get that book. Highly worth having. It's a brilliant book about how to use your mind in ways that you can't believe you can use it. I read the book and I was laughing all the way through because it's so good. You know, I'm going, I like this guy. He's as dense as I am. It's okay, my kind of guy. Oh, I can steal this and not give him credit? Okay. The book right under it, the book called The Business of Negotiation, is a really dynamite book about communicating in business and building rapport. That is what having a cheapy paperback you can buy it, I think, for $4.95. Oh, $6.95 Canadian. Well, it was like yesterday. I asked Robert how many people there were in London, and he says 280,000. I said, what's that? 210,000 Americans? I'm sorry, he didn't get it either. The next two books down, Lateral Thinking and the Bonus Thinking course. If you really want to expand on your ability to think creatively, Edward de Bono is really a seminal thinker. And it's not artificial insemination. I think you're...
I was waiting.
Yeah, you're waiting for it. Isn't it nice to know that I'm predictable? You're hallucinating.
I knew.
What is the sound of one hand slapping? Next book. Any of you ever have writer's block? You ever have writer's block? You're trying to write out something, either a paper or an idea? This book called Writing the Natural Way by Gabriel Lucerico is one of these tall paperbacks you'll find in the writing section of E. Dalton's or Crown or whatever. Really a fun book. It's a neat workbook. I think you find it just absolutely stunning. It's really a great book on writing, and I think the best thing I can say is you'll work your way through it, and you won't call it work. You'll say, I thought this is supposed to be work. It's just a lot of fun. It'll really add a lot of style to your writing, a lot of grace, and a lot of ability to use words in a very powerful way. She's very good. The two last books, the excellence books, A Search for Excellence and A Passion for Excellence, if you only buy one of the books, pick up A Passion for Excellence. I will guarantee you that if every person in the USA and Canada read these two books, the Japanese would know what Pearl Harbor is really all about. Pearl Harbor would be Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, three people who quit IBM, waiting in Tokyo Harbor with computers at sunrise to unload. It's really a super book about how businesses really work, when they work effectively, when they work at all. I think you find it just stunning. The examples, you'll laugh all the way through. You go, I don't believe this. This is just the way in my business. You go, that really makes sense. What an interesting idea. I've never thought of that before. And some of the examples will knock you on your rear end. You go, oh, nobody did that. And you go look up the footnote, and they really did it. That's the reading list. You can, at your convenience, today or tomorrow, read the article. If you have any questions about them, we'll go into that. Now, during break, did anybody have questions that occurred to them they wanted answered? Any questions about how to get to the party tonight? Look, it's very important to party. Very important. If you don't party, you can't have a party. Okay? Freedom party means partying freely. And since your customs has confiscated my stuff again, this may be the last year that I'll ever be allowed to come here. I'll go, hi, I'm vacationing. You're the person who's saying you're for freedom? No, I'm not. I'm for tyranny. Oh, brilliant. Changed my mind.
You'll receive the complimentary police escort.
Yeah. You know, it's really nice to know that if they really don't like me, I have no rights.
Right?
Well, no, in the United States it's different. They read you your rights while they're beating you. That way you can really appreciate this. Do you remember Article 1 of the Constitution? Yes, Reverend King, that guard dog believes in the First Amendment. That's really cool. I feel awful having said it, but I'll think of something even worse later. Now, we're going to talk about rapport. Rapport is probably one of the key elements in what you might call the subliminal elements of persuasion. You could call them body language. You could refer to it as nonverbal communication. You know, anybody who's ever walked down the street in Canada and had someone almost splash you with mud knows nonverbal communication. Hey! Hey, come back here, huh? I'll give you. Now, I know you've never done it, but you've watched it across the street while someone else has done it. They say one picture is worth 1,000 words. That's true sometimes. If it's skinny porn, it's worth 1,000 years. That was cool. I don't understand why everybody's so concerned about kitty porn. I have 3 cats. They're free to do whatever they want. Consenting fur balls. I don't have any objections. They start photographing the kitty with their eyes raw. said that was sick? How did you recognize sickness if you haven't stooped to it? How would you know pornography if you haven't read a lot? Read the pornographic report. You know, they got a Meats Commission thing on pornography. This is better than the magazines I get. You know? Bikers do what? I don't. It's so boring. This really is boring. And only one more thing more boring than pornography is watching these prissy, uptight Presbyterians get upset about it. You know? They're going, this is so awful. How long have you been married? 40 years, and I can't even pronounce that word. You wonder why so many families kill each other. I don't blame them. Can you blame them? They can't even pronounce those words. How can they do those things? Now, rapport. Interesting thing about rapport. Effective communicators, people who are really, really, really good at communicating, whether it's teachers, whether it's therapists, whether it's politics, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's salespeople, absolutely mirror other people's body language compulsively. They persistently, compulsively do it. It's a habit. It's like you have a chocolate addiction. Is anybody here a chocoholic? No, there's nothing wrong with it. The guy at the Hershey hotline, I have this urge. Okay, well, mail you something. A little envelope. They'll send it to you where you're detoxing, right? Interesting thing about mirroring people is they really have this urge to match behaviors of the other person. Usually people who are good communicators do it unconsciously. Now, these communicators discovered at some time early in their life that it's easier to meet a person at his own model of the world, at his own experience of reality, than to get him to join yours. Now, there are a lot of ways you can match people's behavior. I want you during lunch hour to notice something. Is there anybody newly in love? I'm not talking about you've got a good love that's been around a while. You just fell in love with somebody. And if you're married, don't raise your hand, one of you. Could be a slow afternoon for you. If you watch people who've just fallen in love, communicating at a table, it's really funny. They'll sit the same. They'll lean over their plates the same. I mean, it's like watching, remember the Marx Brothers movie where they had the door and they thought it was a mirror? And it was, who's the one with the blonde hair? Harpo and Groucho were pretending they were each other. And they were moving the same thing. They were mirroring each other's behavior. Most effective communicators do this unconsciously. You can find out when people aren't communicating, because as a matter of fact, you'll find one of them will be doing something totally different from the other. If you doubt it, watch it. It's really true. Now, there are a lot of ways that people match behaviors of other people. Okay, they do it in body posture. I've watched computer programmers. This is really great. I love computer programmers. You watch them in airports, and it's always like this. And they're always reading the paper back. And I mean, I can hear them up and say, hey, who do you work for? What do you mean work for? I said, you're a computer programmer. How did you know? Because they all sit like that. What they've done is they've unconsciously developed similar behavior patterns. Well, that's not abnormal. That's not abnormal. Body posture, you find that when you're having a very intense conversation, you're leaning over the table. If you're getting through, the other person's leaning over the table too. Of course, that's similar behavior between a client and a guilty man through plastic and prison too. Good rapport, two thieves talking to each other. Now, I'm sorry if I've offended any attorneys. If I didn't, someone else would have. Now, you'll find that matching behaviors, mirroring behaviors, is also done in movement tempo, speed and rhythm. It's very common. You ever move to another part of the country? In the U.S., this happens all the time. You move to the South and you start drawling, and you talk slower. You really do. You find it just happens naturally. You don't have to think about it and say, I think I'll talk Southern today. Perhaps I could communicate in a more effective fashion. You walk out and you go, hi, Billy Bob. How y'all doing? You get that southern preacher like, you know, who's the one in Louisiana? You been watching? Yeah, he is. He's a very good communicator. Neither does he. You'll get into the temple with the people that you're with. Isn't it? Do you ever notice how when people move to Canada, within a week they're saying, "Eh? That's right, eh? What's the matter with B? C, D, E? They're stuck on E." All right? You'll watch, if you're ever walking downtown in a seedy section of town, you'll notice that when bums are trying to get spare change off people, the really good ones, the really effective panhandlers, will actually get into step with them. I mean, they're walking just like a businessman. I'm serious. They'll walk right into step and say, "Hey, buddy, here's some money. I need some money for coffee. About $1.50, I think, over at the liquor store." And they'll get right in the step, they'll get the bread, and they'll peel off. But they're right in step, and they're literally, you think you're seeing them marching together. Because that's one way of building rapport, and the effective bums should learn this. Hey, there are people who are very effective panhandlers. You ever see those people collecting cans? Right? That's awfully hard work for the amount of money it's got. Right? But they're very good at it. I don't know why, it's like being good at, leading people. There's not much future in doctoring, but these guys are really good at it. Well, the bums who are really good at collecting bread are really good at getting in step with people. Now, there's another way, and I want you to mark this down. The way that you can match other people's behavior, body posture, movement tempo, that's speed and rhythm. If you're talking with someone, you ever notice how some people talk really, really, really fast? Like the tongue is on like speed. Usually the brain is slightly ahead of it too, so you wonder what that's on. Work factor 2. Speech tempo. Speech tempo. You ever listen to people from Puerto Rico talk? It's like singing. Buenos días, es very good. Broadway. But it's got a melodic sound to it. It's very pretty. I like it. But you listen to it, it's almost like calypso singing, Put the lime in the coconut. I'm waiting. All right? Speech tempo and speech volume is another way that you can mirror another person's behavior. Now, I'm not asking you to be copycats. So if this is a list of things you won't do, mark down copycat should not be among the list. Now, you ever think what the word communication means? It comes from the same word as communion. Common, sharing. Those all come from the same root, which means to participate in. Communication involves having things in common with people. It doesn't mean agreeing on all political issues. It means having things in common. It means swimming in the same waters as another. When you mirror, when you match, when you pace another person's behavior, it involves presenting to the other person those parts of yourself that are most nearly like the other person's. It's a way of jumping into non-cognitive agreement. How many of you have read my Art of Political Cross-Dressing? How many of you have read it? Okay? I talk about using the language of the people you're talking to. Suppose I could teach you to use the body language of the people you're talking to, and teach them liberty using that language. That would be cross-dressing behavior, wouldn't it? Well, non-clothing cross-dressing. That's one of the things we're going to learn. Now, mirroring, matching, pacing another person's, getting in the pace with another person's behavior is another way of validating the other person's experience. It's a way of saying, you're all right, I accept you. Who you are is acceptable. I found out one thing. Agreement doesn't require any explanations. Someone says, blah, 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 and you go, I agree. You don't have to tell them why. They go, hey, okay. Have you noticed that's the end of the subject? When you say, I agree? You want to blow somebody's mind? I used to do this, really. Somebody get in your face. I agree. You win. You're totally right. I hope you're happy you straightened me out. It's going to ruin their whole day. That's a way of not matching their behavior. That's a way of sort of screwing with their head. A way of reaching into their mind and going, Now, Now, matching the other person's behavior is a way of establishing trust and credibility. Why? You know, in the South, if you don't walk the way, because I lived in Betamax, Louisiana for a year, and I was driving through Biloxi, Mississippi, and I went into one of these hamburger places, or a hot dog, chicken. I don't eat red meat, so I was trying to remember what sort of meat, what sort of animals were being sacrificed for my life. So it was the chickens. Colonel Sanders had done it for me. I was sitting in a booth, and then the other booth behind me were two girls, must have been 13, 14, and one of them says, "Yes, I'm pre-engaged." I said, "So-and-so." Pre-engaged. I like that. What a hustle. These guys have convinced a girl she's pre-engaged. Right? And I listened to them talking, and I watched the way they interacted, and the way they interacted was, they were really in step with each other. It was like a dance. You ever watch two people dance, and they're not in the same rhythm? And it's like one's doing rumba, and one's doing cha-cha-cha, and it doesn't look right? It looks like a bad movie. Have you ever seen that? You ever seen that on the dance floor? You ever done that? I've done that. Yes. You know, there's a problem. You've got two anarchists, and they're off in both directions. Two statists, they both want to lead. You can have problems. When you get in the step with the other person, that's the way good communication is. It's like a dance, where you're literally, you ever have a dance conversation, right? You're dancing with a person, you're moving at the same rhythm, right? You're having a conversation. Now, you're not both in agreement as to what time you're getting to your apartment. You know that if you keep in step, and you do some good moves, it could happen. It could happen, and it should happen. Now, what you're doing is you're establishing rapport. Now, there's a whole phenomenon, and this is not just a matter of my opinion. I can tell you that if you watch people that are communicating, this will happen. You'll see it in salespeople, you'll see it in therapists. I used to do this with therapists. You'll watch a compulsive mirror. Somebody compulsively has to copy your behavior, and I'll slide down on my seat. Without telling them, I'll just slide down on my seat and I'll fall on their butt and wonder what happened. No, I go, what's the matter? No, I don't understand. What a mystery. It's a great way of having fun with therapists. You know, they think that they are in control of reality. Screw their whole day up. I thought I controlled reality, but I have a sore bottom. Why is that? There are lots of ways of doing that. Or mirror them and then spill your coffee and see what happens to them. That's good. I spill my coffee too. Very good. Now, what happens is when you pace the other person, I'm going to use these words interactively. Mirroring, matching, or pacing. They mean the same thing, okay? When I match your behavior, I'm confident. I'm in step with it. I'm in movement, in sync with it. We're synchronized, right? Matching, so if I use any of the words, they all mean the same thing, sort of. Okay? Now, when you pace the other person, you create a phenomenon called synchrony. Now, have any of you ever heard the word synchrony before? Not symphony. Synchrony is a legitimate phenomenon. You take two pendulum clocks and put them on a wall next to each other. This is a true story. You put them on the wall, and the pendulums are moving in different directions. Within a day, they'll both be in step. If you don't believe it, do it. I'm very serious. There's a whole phenomenon, a body phenomenon that shows they do, in fact, get into sync. It's called entrainment. That's the whole body of it. You can pick up a book called The Silent Pulse by George Leonard that talks about this phenomenon. Very interesting book, highly worth reading. Not on my reading list, but highly worth reading nonetheless. Now, what happens when you create synchrony, being in sync with someone, is that they move as one with you. Clocks on the wall, dancing is a way of syncing. Move to another part of the country and find yourself falling into speech patterns. You know, you go to California and you're all bitching. So within a week, you're really there. Oh, yeah. Totally awesome. What was your name? Develop whole new meanings to drug craze. You know, these people are doing this without chemical help. This is a really learning achievement. Now, if you move to New York City, you move to the Midwest, wherever you move to, you'll find that you fall into the pace of life. Anybody, you ever gone to New York City? All right, New York City is easy to talk because everybody walks like this. Right? They're watching your ass, you might pull a shiv on them, right? And they're walking fast because someone else might beat them to the cheese. Right? These are rats in a cage, so you might beat them to the cheese. So you're going to make sure they get there first. You go to Boston, they got a different pace. You go out west, they got a different pace. You go to Canada, they got a different pace. You start falling into the pace. And as you do that, you start getting along with people. You ever notice how when you move to a slightly different area, a slightly different social group, at first you don't fit in. It's not just because you're new. It's because you haven't gotten into the patterns of movement that people have there. I like when I go to a group, I'll observe for a little while, watch how they're behaving. I'll watch some of the basic patterns. And within, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, I just fit right in. It used to blow people's minds who would go with me to parties. They go, hey, how come you fit in and I didn't? I go, you want it? And then I take them to parties. Let's do it this way. And they go, oh, no, try it. And you go, hey, this is really great. Does anybody else know? That's a secret. That's what people who are natural persuaders do all the time. Now, pacing does something else for you. Matching the other person's behavior gives you one other benefit. It lets you experience the world as the other person does. You can really get inside that other person's mind. You can learn how he experiences reality. I know people who took drugs, hallucinogens, so that they would understand what other people were talking about when they used drugs. They said, well, if you could understand how LSD enhances your perceptions, right? A lot of people said, well, I'll try it. They tried it, and they were able to understand, because they got into the other person's drug-induced reality, they were able to understand what that other person was talking about. But that's equally true when you're talking about social reality. If you start getting into the movements and the tempo of speech in a certain part of the country or a certain part of the world, you find yourself getting into the attitudes of the people, understanding the attitudes. You ever go to an island? Like, I honeymooned in Hawaii, and it was like everybody's hang loose. Well, in Texas, this means bullshit. I didn't make that up, it really does. It used to mean hook 'em horns for University of Texas, then it meant bullshit, What do you think of that? Right? You do that in Hawaii, and it's like, hang loose, man. Relax. Get into the pace of things. Be as the waves, flow with it. And you start getting into the island rhythm. Someone says, you want to go back to the States? Oh, maybe later. You really get into the rhythm. Have you ever done it? When you start doing that, you start getting into the attitudes. Matter of fact, the people who really hate vacations are the kind of people who go, I don't understand what everybody likes about this place. Everybody's standing around looking at the leaves, watching sunsets. What a lot of shit. If it weren't for the bare-breasted native girls, I probably wouldn't even stay. These are people who can't really appreciate it. They're people who can't get into the same pace. Okay, now, I'm going to give you some things to try out with each other in a moment. All right. Once you fully pace the other person, you can begin leading him where you want him. It's like sales. Get agreement? Yes, I agree with that. Get agreement? Yes, I agree with that. Get agreement? Yes, I agree with that. And then go for the close. Make the deal. That's something they didn't agree with. It's easier to keep someone saying yes. Look, we like each other, don't we? Yes. And we really had a wonderful experience tonight, haven't we? Yeah. And you enjoyed dinner that I spent $14 on? Yeah. How are you for breakfast? Go for it. I got agreement on 3 at my work. If not, you might suggest lunch. That is what happens when you get into somebody's step. When you get into sync with somebody, when you establish rapport on a non-cognitive level, it's very easy to go, they're experiencing on a non-conscious level the fact that you're kind of like them, because you're behaving like them, you're using the same language, you dress the same, you're talking in similar patterns. They'll feel like you're their kind of person. Well, if I'm your kind of person, it's perfectly reasonable for you to hear out my ideas, because they're ideas you might have, because you're your kind of person. It's a fact of life. It's the truth. It's a way of political cross-dressing, which you'll get in a bit. So the trick is, you get in a step with them, you pace their behavior, you match it, you match it, you match it, and then you try a little bit something different and see if they follow you. And strangely enough, they will. Use your senses. Is somebody following your lead? If so, keep leading. And if not, go back, get in a step with them, get in a step with them, get in a step with them, and try something different. See if they follow. That's what communication involves, very often. Very often it's always taken it from another perspective. Now, I'd like to give you a little practice exercise so you can Intellectually, this may or may not make sense to you. Building rapport. Intellectually, you might say unconscious processes. Ha. Unconscious processes. Ha. That's a lot of psychological hokey. If I wanted to have a little fun, I would do some trance inductions here during the workshop, and I'd have some of your right arms would start lifting up, and you'd go, I don't have an unconscious, what's doing this? I did that for a while in communication workshops, and some people said, no, you're just going to drive everybody crazy. I said, I need company. So, we're going to do a few exercises to show you. Here's what I want you to do. We're going to do it one element at a time. Okay? One is speech tempo. I want you to mark this down. We're going to practice speech tempo. And two is posture of the other person. And third thing is facial expression. Now, what I want you to do is pick a partner whom you didn't come with. Someone you didn't walk into the room with. This isn't customs, is it? Okay, what I'd like you to do is, the first thing I'd like you to do is have a conversation with someone you didn't come with, someone you don't know, and I want you to get into step with their speech tempo. I want you to speak, just use your words, but use their speed and tempo and flowing of their speech. I think you'll find it's an interesting experience. So the other person, it's like, you'll kind of laugh. I always used to kind of laugh and go, God, that's the way I sound? Oh, shit, I'm in trouble. All right, speech tempo is the first thing I want you to do. Posture, you may not want to do it here. We'll try speech tempo first. Now I want you to try facial expressions. You ever mimic somebody? Your mother would say, how'd you like your face to freeze like this? And you'd go, just fine with me. So she weren't going to give her the satisfaction. But in fact, she was mimicking or mirroring your, and you went, oh yeah. And it sort of got you off it. So what I'd like you to do is pick somebody you weren't with, have them tell you a story. Tell you about anything they want. Yep.
I was just wondering what did happen to your face.
Yay, I can see Mark Emery has some friends. And I'd always doubted that he had any friends. What did happen when I was 4 years old? Your parents were married? No. That's not true. Your parents were married. Different people. What I'd like you to do is pick somebody. We're going to take a brief, I'm going to take about 2 or 3 minutes. Have them, what I want you to do is have the person tell you a little bit about their viewpoint on politics. Pick any subject you want. Listen to it, just talk the way you normally talk. Then what I want you to do is, after they talk to you that way for a minute and a half, I want you to tell them anything you want, but do it at their speed and their style. Okay? And if you want to get a little exaggerated, that's okay, but try not, I don't want you to caricature it, I want you to match it. Can we do that? All right, pick a partner. We'll do that in 5 minutes. He does it naturally. He sells about 4 times what the other people in his office do in this little boiler room. True story. When you're interacting with someone, just pick one element, just try one at a time and see what happens. And I think you'll find what happens is really interesting. You go, gee, you know, people around me are so much more open-minded now. They communicate so much better now that I've learned to listen differently. It's a very, very valuable skill. Try it when you're sitting across the table from someone. Not at lunch today, because I don't want to go through that. I want to interface in just a totally terrible way at lunch. Just any old way you want to just ruin my day, but don't match it. There's no trouble. One is enough. One is too much for you, my friends. Do that. Make a list of different ways that you can match the person's behavior in the step one. Volume of voice. I got a friend who's a yeller. Do you have any friends who are yellers? You know, right? You don't want to yell back at them, right? Get on their side. You know, when they're complaining, do they bitch and moan about stuff? Damn Cubs lost another game, right? Or Blue Jays. I don't know. What do they complain about? Are they complainers? Or are they just loud? No, loud. Loud. Try matching their volume. Yeah. Yeah, you're right, Dad. I agree with you. Yeah, well, that's wrong, and I was totally opposed to it. Yeah, Dad, I think we ought to take another look. Make sure you do it at the same level. You don't have to? You get quieter. So if nothing else, it'll make your point so much more liberal. But in fact, it's another way of getting into step with them. It's another way of showing them that you understand how they're experiencing the world. Because that's all rapport is establishing on a non-cognitive level and understanding that your experience is valid. You know, your senses tell you what they tell you. And you're acceptable as a person. Well, no one's going to reject that. Isn't it nice to know you're acceptable? Isn't it nice to know that your senses are valid? That your perceptions are valid? That you are okay? That you have a right to your own feelings? You have a right to be who you are without any improvements? Thank you very much. You know, I hope to God I never have to go through life and have everybody improving me. It's like Henry David Thoreau said, if I knew with certitude that there was a man on his way to my home to do me good, I should flee for my life. The people who are trying to improve us all the time are doing the same thing. I think if you practice different aspects of this, try it with tone of voice, try it with walking with your friends. If you go out for a walk, how many of you walk faster than your friends? So the other half walk slower, right? Okay? Try getting in a step with them and find out what happens to your conversations. They get strange, they get real nice, they get intimate, they get cozy, they get very positive, very effective. Okay? Now we're going to move it. Yes?
I have a strange friend with wand.
The one?
You wander around, they wander around and like they're listening, I think, but at the same time they wander and then they come back to me. Well,
yeah, well, I have a friend like that. I had a friend like that in college who was studying history. I was a triple major, science, philosophy, and political science. Totally useless. He was studying history, and he would walk like this. He'd look at the ground, and he was discussing. And philosophy, he'd look down, right? It was really neat, because several of us would be walking behind him. It looked like a big long centipede. And he communicated like mad when we did that. I don't know why. I have no idea. I'm not a psychologist, priest, confessor, but he interacted with that. It really connected to him. You know, it's a very effective way of establishing rapport. So don't be surprised if friends see you, they're going to think, this is a schizophrenic etch-a-sketch, right? you know. I think you'll find people do all kinds of things. I'll do odd things like during conversations. I'll sit on chairs oddly. I'll sit on the floor. That's part of what I do because my brain is in another dimension. This one is a loner.
Would it help then if I wandered around with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The things I don't match or mirror or copy are tics, stuttering, things that someone would be personally offended by. Euphemisms. If someone always goes, you don't want to do to them. You don't want to do to them. Yeah, Steve, I think, that will not cause rapport, it will cause fist fight. But I think if you match other forms of what might be considered non-offensive or non-bad habit forms of behavior, you'll have rapport. I don't want you to take my word for it. I'd like you sometime in the next week try matching just tempo of voice. Then try matching posture on a different occasion. Don't worry about doing it all at once. You only have to do a little bit. And amazing things happen. When you start getting into rapport with a person, try a little communication with them. Start off on a point of agreement, and then change. Sometimes I'll get in rapport with someone and then do something totally odd. You can do that. Or maybe I'd be sitting just like you are and we'd be talking. And start building rapport. And after talking with you for a few minutes, and you move back, and I move back, and we got some, in training, we got some synchrony. I might go, well, I guess that's about it. He'll stand right up. You can do that all the time. You can do that with all kinds of things. It's a great way of busting up the party. When you want them to leave, the last people time. Well, I guess I'm getting ready to go to bed. Go to the door, Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move to the next section. Time now is 11:26. Let me ask you, would I screw up your schedule if we went to 12:30 and then did lunch? Is there anybody whose schedule I would screw up? I'm serious. I want to know. This is not group pressure. With that group schedule. Okay. All right. Then I will stay with my original schedule, so finish it at noon. Okay? All right. I keep my commitments unless there's, unanimous consent. This is what's called responsibility. Something I believe in. Let's talk about representational systems. Now, Mary Lou, I made you a promise.
You made a lot of promises.
Yeah. 9 inches? Surely. That was a tape measure joke. What were you thinking of? Boy. Gutter. Mary Lou was one of the first libertarian groups who hired me to do an Art of Political
I
Persuasion.
am not a group.
She was a dismembered member of a group that hired me. She's correct. She's not a group. Small crowd yet. All right, consenting adults. If she weren't a schizophrenic, she'd be totally alone. I'm sorry. I told you that I would be doing much differently than we did last time. And I'm focusing more on persuasion. I need a little bit of feedback here, America. This is what's called on the spot. Would you find this more useful if you could have taken this back 4 years ago? Or less useful than the way we did it now?
I contextual. What you did then did what it needed to do. And what you're doing now is doing what's supposed to do, I think.
Okay.
And
I appreciate that non-answer.
I want to throw you a couple of compliments.
I learned to stop swearing, didn't I?
Shit,
isn't that great?
You're not as much a logic blaster anymore.
I'm not.
No, you don't put people on the spot like you used to.
Yeah.
Which is good.
What was the reason for that?
I know.
Death threats? Let's talk a little bit about representational systems. Now, don't let the word overly impress you. Representational systems have nothing to do with systems of government. What we're talking about is the way the brain processes and organizes information. The evidence of the senses. Now, 2,000 years ago, a man named Aristotle argued for the validity of senses. A philosopher named John Reed, a Scottish philosopher, early 1800s, tried to validate the evidence of the senses. Early 20th century, Carl Mercier, John Wickerby, on to Ayn Rand, and then later to a fellow named David Kelly, tried to validate sensory evidence. Now, in the real world, nobody worries about, do my eyes deceive me? Do my ears lie to me? Is my sense of touch real? Philosophers who tell you, your senses deceive you. Do look both ways before crossing the road. People who believe that consciousness is created by the mind rather than interpreted do not walk across firing ranges during shooting. They don't go, the bullets are not real. The problem is not just is sensory evidence valid. Philosophically, that's a problem. With, philosophers, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? I don't want to know that. I want to know how many libertarians can dance on the head of a tax collector. That's something. And being an experimentalist I am, let's go find out. Now, sensory evidence, the way the brain organizes sensory information is really interesting. There were a couple guys named Richard Bandler and John Bender who've done a research project which they started in a book called The Structure of Magic, after 2 volumes. And now, as usual, there's an interesting thing about inventions that you may discover. If you ever believe that inventions were put together by the right guys or the right women, they sat together, let's invent the cyclotron. And we'll put together the money and we'll get the funding. Inventions are always invented by the wrong person, in the wrong place, for the wrong reason, at the wrong time, for the wrong customer. I didn't make that up. That is not my opinion. In fact, there have been several studies that show that's true. Calculator watches? you'd say to yourself, calculators. Who was really into that? Well, the guys who made slide rules. Remember when years ago we all used to have slide rules, right? Everybody had these really neat slide rules. You figure these people are into calculations, right? That's a very important, that's what a slide rule is for. You figure these would be the guys that get into calculators, right? Wrong. They saw the calculators coming along and said, it's a fad. Now no one carries slide rules. That fad supplanted them. The wrong people at the wrong time continually invent everything from color television to indoor lighting to how the senses operate. These two people, instead of being psychologists, instead of being biologists, one is a linguist and the other is a mathematician. These are the kind of people you think would understand how the senses work, right? Good research progress. Hi, I'm a mathematician. Oh, what do you want to do your project on? Oh, and how the senses work. That seems like a reasonable project for a mathematician. Certainly we'll fund that. These two people got together because they found it interesting. Now, they generated an approach that they call neuro-linguistic programming. Don't be impressed with the language. Whenever you want to really keep people from classifying you, think of something really obscure. They'll never be able to classify you. What would you call your political viewpoint? I call it neo-political, non-monarchical, quasi-anarchistic with some government leanings, macroeconomic, neo-Austrian. That's my particular viewpoint. My friends have variants on this. They won't be able to classify after that. They won't even be able to remember. Thaler and Grinder called their system neuro-linguistic programming. Now what they're doing is this. The word neuro identifies the fact that all behavior is neurologically generated. Neurons, brain activity. Linguistic indicates that the brain processes are represented or structured or sequenced into models and strategies through language and communication. We use language to chunk up the experience. We use the word orange to chunk up this and other orange objects. We use the word green to identify this and that and the other thing. It's a way of us segmenting and sequencing our information. Programming refers to the fact that you can organize the components of these systems to achieve specific outcomes. So basically, neuro-linguistic programming was designed to find out how the brain functions and how to use the way it functions to more effectively make this user-friendly. Okay? That isn't clear enough. Let me tell you something. That's as clear as it ever gets with those guys, because they're fun people. Now, what they talked about is how your senses work. Sight, touch, feel, taste, and so on. Or we've all got 5 senses. Some of us are missing a 4th sense. But we've got the other 5. Now, most of our awareness of the world, most of the way that we input information into our system is through 3 of our systems. Sight, sound, and touch. Those are the big 3. Unless you're a cook, someone who works in the perfume industry, the odds are of you using a lot of your sense of taste or smell are real minimal. Now, these are your primary ways of gathering information: sight, hearing, touch. Now, our primary ways of understanding, of storing, of coding our awareness, of building maps and models inside our head, is done through these senses. How we learn whether seeing or hearing or feeling raw reality will determine our model of understanding. Every model that you have, every way of putting together information has resources and it has limitations. Now, what does all this stuff add up to? Because you're saying, well, no, this is point raw shit. I don't want to know theory. That's cop-cop. I don't know real world stuff. We'll get to the real stuff. Now, I want you to think of each sensory channel as a language. Visual being language number 1. Auditory being language number 2. And tactile being language number 3. To be understood, you have to speak in the same tone as the other person. To understand, you have to listen with a native ear. To communicate, you have to do both. Now I'm going to ask you to consider 5 statements, and I want you to listen very carefully to them. because they're going to affect the way that you communicate. And if you want a way of amplifying how effective you are in communication, this will blow your mind away. Dirty Harry never made a day like this. Sentence number 1. I'm going to criticize you people. Now you're used to this because you made the mistake of thinking. That's the ultimate sin. Shame on you. Now here are the critiques of you. Are you ready for these critiques? I know you've never heard them before, so they'll be all new. Critique number 1. Your group has a lot of bright people, but I just don't see things from the same perspective. Your rhetoric is unclear. Your promises seem vague and fuzzy. Statement number 2. I've listened to your ideas. I've given you a fair hearing. You may think I'm just giving you static, but I believe many of your ideas are unsound. Statement number 3. I just can't get a handle on what your problem is. You're out of touch with Canada's real needs. Your cold and sensitive approach to social and political issues makes me believe you're unfeeling people. 4. Your whole approach stinks. 5. I met one of your people before. The whole episode left a bad taste in my mouth. Each way that I communicated the information utilized a different sensory channel. They used different predicates. Statement number 1, your group has a lot of bright people. That's a visual quality, brightness, right? But I just don't see things from the same perspective. Perspective is a visual term, so we'll see, right? The only way you can understand this is by paying attention to visual memories. Your rhetoric is unclear, and your promises seem vague and fuzzy. Again, visual terms. Second statement, I listen to your ideas, fair hearing, giving you static, believe your ideas are unsound. Now, if you think this is trivial, wait till you see what's next. I just can't get a handle on what your problem is. It's a tactile quality. You ever hear, what? The whole idea is slippery to me. You're describing that in tactile terms, human terms. You're out of touch with Canada's real needs. And this makes me believe you're unfeeling people. The way, and I'll leave the last 2 out because most people don't use smell, your ideas stink, or taste, bad taste in your mouth. These are not just metaphors. These are literally the way people are processing the information in their head. You know, as Rand pointed out, the ultimate foundation of your knowledge is sensory evidence. That's the ultimate epistemological foundation. You can't get any more basic epistemologically. How we process the evidence of our senses will determine, very often, how we communicate and how we think. Let me prove the point. If you pay close attention to the words, the phrases, and the images a person uses, you'll become aware of what sensory language he's speaking. Write that down. That's important. Not only what language they're speaking, but what language they're thinking in. How many of you know a foreign language? Okay. What are the foreign languages you know? French. French, okay. Any others? Spanish?
Dutch.
Dutch? All right. You'll discover something. As you speak Dutch, French, Spanish, or English, your personality will slightly modify. Ask your friends. Ask your friends. You start talking German, you have this urge to march into Holland. My family's German, I can say that. But we knew no Nazis. We thought they were summer camps. Oh. Of course, I was a cook. I started the oven. That's so rotten. Now, if you pay attention to the words and phrases somebody uses, you're going to find out, you're going to be identifying your dominant perceptual mode. You're going to find that people like habits. You ever notice how you have a habit of speech? That's a good idea, eh? Or the one that they use with the Australian commercial? How you doing? Good day. Nice seeing you. Good day. Right? Everybody has their own little word cats, their own little phrases that constantly end up in communication. All right? Now I know that if you thought about your friends, you'd think about phrases. Give me an example. Has anybody got a friend who uses one or two phrases often? What?
I think that, I'd say tell me about it too much.
Okay, confess. Tell me about it. That's very auditory oriented. Nothing wrong. That's fine. What about you have other friends who just use a phrase? Or, he's always saying,
Nixon or Reagan always says, let me put it another way.
Nancy says it's 2 in the morning. Well, let me put it. Oh, now come on. Just because he isn't reading pornography doesn't mean he's not trying out. No, you see, you bigots, you think that sexuality is for people under 60. I got news for you. It gets better. So my grandmother told me. She wouldn't lie. Now, these phrases aren't just metaphors or figurative speech. What they are is they're linguistic indicators that alert you to which sensory mode a person is functioning in. Now, if you were talking to someone who only spoke French, how would you communicate? French, right? Or you'd try and find a common language. Dutch, you'd use Dutch if you spoke. Spanish, you'd use Spanish. If someone is primarily processing their information in visual terms, using their visual channels, you're not communicating if you try and communicate with them in feeling terms or in auditory terms. I have seen so many conversations. Example, I have a friend who's into swapping. That's a fancy word for cheating in maths. They're into involvement in extramarital engagements, okay? When they describe the quality of their relationship with their spouse, they use tactile terms. I feel stuck. Our relationship isn't going anywhere. When you ask them to describe their involvement with the other person, they'll use visual terms. I don't know, it's just such a bright, illuminating experience for me. Everything just seems so clear and they're thinking differently about their relationship with their marital partner and with the other person. Most people who are into swapping regularly, sort of the kind of people who transmit AIDS regularly. These people, when they're describing their sexual predilections, use gustatory terms. They'll use terms like, I want to be a gourmet of sex. I develop a whole wide range of tastes. And these all these, it's like they're cooking, That's literally the way they perceive it. Now, if you know that someone's communicating in a language, the best way to communicate back to them, to be understood, is to communicate in their language. Does that make sense or not make sense? Does that sound right? Is it clear? Gotcha. Now, what I want you to do is this, and I want some people to take notes on this. I want you to give me phrases, metaphors, expressions, or figures of speech for each mode. Let's start with visual mode. Now, if you have problems thinking of visual phrases or metaphors, let's say we're going to criticize an idea. Okay? Say it's socialism. That's a highly criticizable. I figure it ought to be an endangered species. Okay? Let's use some visual phrases that would criticize an idea like socialism. What would be one visual phrase?
I don't see what it's based on.
I don't see what it's based on. There's one. How about another one?
Cloudy.
What?
Cloudy.
Very good. Very good. And cloudy. Okay, what would be another word?
Red.
Very good. That's a visual quality. What would be another one?
Short-sighted.
Short-sighted. How about you're not seeing it from my point of view? How about another one?
Can't picture it.
What?
Can't picture it.
What?
Can't picture that.
Can't picture it. How about fuzzy-headed? Fuzzy. How about another?
Blind to reality.
Blind to reality, in the dark. Use socialism or in the dark. You're blind to reality. How about another phrase that you might use to critique an idea? A visual phrase. Visual metaphor. Out of focus? That would be another one. Let's move to a slightly different Let's say admitting a mistake. Let's use visual phrases. Let's say you're going to admit a mistake to somebody and you're talking to someone who's primarily a visualizer. What would be a phrase you might use?
I see it. I see the light.
And I felt the heat, Lauren. I see the light. That's a very good one. What an illuminating idea. I'm enlightened now. How about another one? Expressing the fact that you made a mistake. If you're admitting a mistake, what would be another visual metaphor there?
You're clear now.
Clear now, okay?
I didn't see it before.
Didn't see it before? The big picture? Foreseeing here. I didn't foresee my mistake.
My eyes have been opened.
Ah! Okay? If you go through every visual quality, clarity, intensity, that could be a bright idea. I was in the dark. You didn't tell me where you stood. You know, it's totally in the dark here. That would be a visual metaphor. Now I want to move, let's say we're describing politicians. I wanted to pick pet subjects. Something we could all, sort of latch onto and turn into us. If you were using visual ways of describing politicians, what would be a few visual phrases you might use to describe them?
Evil.
That's not a visual one.
I can visualize it.
Shifty.
Yeah.
Blind.
Blind. Okay.
Black.
What?
Very dark.
Dark. Yeah, I see a dark future for Canada if he's elected.
Black sheep, foreboding.
Foreboding. All right. Black sheep. Okay, what would be another visual metaphor that might? Yeah.
His leg's gone out.
All right. Or how about my favorite? Of course, like nobody's home.
Foggy-minded.
Very good. Foggy-minded. Muddle-headed. I don't understand. It's muddy to me. You ever experience that? It's almost like you can't see through it. Okay. Now, let's move to what?
Dirty.
Dirty. Murky might be another one. Cool.
Can't see the world for himself.
Can't see the world for himself. Okay. Now, we've used visual terms, and you'll notice in conversations, if you pay attention to this, you go, oh, there's another one. There's another one. Pretty soon you have a sore cheek. There's another one. And then you get into tactile mode again. Oh. Let's move to auditory. We're talking about ideas, describing ideas in a way that uses sound metaphors. I don't want any unsound metaphors.
That really grates on me.
Deaf to reason.
That grates on me.
Deaf to reason.
Deaf to reason.
Sounds good.
Sounds good?
Shrill.
Music to my ears. I don't mean to knock your idea.
Shrill.
Shrill. The shrill voices of socialism. Would be another.
A harmonious voice of freedom.
We need political harmony. Four guys at barbershop quartet. Socialism is bad.
Strident.
What?
Strident.
That could be. That could be. What would be another way of describing it using sound terms?
I can hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Clear as bell.
Clear as a bell.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. You don't say.
I hear you, Tom.
I hear you.
Playing my tune.
That's right. They're in tune with the Canadian public. We think they're singing. They're not singing. That's a way of using an auditory metaphor to communicate an idea. Now, let's move to tactile. Sense of touch, feeling. Let's, how about communicate love to another person? Let's say you're communicating love to somebody, and you want to use feeling, tactile terms. What would be a few you could use?
I feel warm.
I feel warm. Mushy? Okay. What would be another one? Oh, we're getting sucker sweet. Okay, we'll get vicious again. How about to point out a mistake? Now, here gives you a chance to be really aggressive to somebody you don't like. You're pointing out a mistake, and we're using tactile terms, yeah?
That's really cold and insensitive.
Cold and insensitive. Absolutely. Out of touch.
Such a reality.
All right, out of touch with reality. Sorry, I stole here. I stepped on your line.
Wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot.
Wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole or a 11-foot Hungarian. European comment. Yes. What? Oh.
Very stiff and loose.
Stiff and loose.
Hard-hearted.
Hard-hearted. Ooh.
Slimy.
Slimy.
Slippery.
I know that.
Slippery. Sleazy.
Dense?
Dense. I don't understand. What is the matter with you? Why are you so dense? Are you out of touch with the Canadian public? Can't you get a grip on these ideas? You grasping politicians don't understand. I don't want to push an idea on you now.
Railroad.
Railroad. Government subsidized railroad.
No.
Press gang.
What?
Press gang. Press gang.
Press gang.
Press gang.
Press gang?
He doesn't know this term means in America.
It's a way to get sailors for the Navy.
Yeah.
Grab the old British.
Oh, press. Oh,
Grab 'em.
thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. Like pressed into service, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
My hands are tied.
Yeah, I got filmed. That was Mark's copy of Penthouse, right?
It just doesn't move.
Doesn't move me. What a kick in the butt that idea was. What?
Shanghai.
Shanghai. Okay. Okay, now, you might view that as just sort of a fun thing to do. As an odd way of communicating ideas. But let's keep in mind that. What I'd like you to do, I call it matching predicates. Okay? Don't be overly impressed. Mark it down as matching predicates. What I want you to do is when you hear visual terms in someone's speech or auditory terms, listen for them. Listen, say, okay, which sensory system is this person talking to me in? And you're going to find it's going to blow your mind. You're going to go, I thought he was lying to me. I thought this was bullshit. I thought the good stuff was in the afternoon. You know, people really are communicating like that. I found that I fall into conversations with people, and in a couple of minutes, people who hadn't been communicating with each other going, how come you can talk to my spouse and she's not talking to me? Or how can you talk to that thick-headed, dense, stubborn person? How come I couldn't get through it? I just couldn't get a grip on the ideas. I'll say, well, he looked to me to be a very clear-thinking, far-sighted man with a proper perspective. And I'm sure that if I presented the big picture, that we could reach an enlightening understanding.
Right over his head.
Way over his head. Now, by using that person's language, by communicating with them in that language, through that sensory channel, you're going to the part of the brain that's doing all the processing of the information. In fact, your brain does organize things visually and auditorily and tactilely. Doesn't mean it's the only way it can be organized. I'm just saying that normally does happen. Listen for the predicates. Yes, sir?
Do we tend to use one system more than others?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You'll find, if you want to have a little fun, you'll find generally most intellectuals tend to be visualizers.
Because we can't listen to ourselves.
No,
We don't listen
You're
to
supposed to.
ourselves.
Okay? Some people, you find musicians tend to be auditory. You know, you listen to phrases that you hear jazz musicians talk about. I hear you, man. Man, I'm rapping with some buddies, you know, brothers, and, you know, this is really... And they'll start, you know, say, you know, I was pointing this out and just came right, you know? They're communicating in sounds. That's normal. Because that's what they're in the business of, is making sounds. Right? That's literally what music is all about. Doing it well. Sense of touch. You find invariably when people are talking romantically, it tends not to be visual. It tends to be very, boy, I just felt all warm inside when I'm around her, or when I'm around him. Golly, I just get so uptight. Well, that's just warmth with a little fear mixed in. What I'd like you to do is listen to people in conversations. You can do this if you don't want to listen to overhear conversations. You don't want to be a spiritual lawyer. You can do this on radio or television. When you're hearing people communicate ideas, listen. Which is their dominant mode? You're correct. People tend to lean on one system. They tend to use one or another or another. Find out what their system is and listen to it. They'll come up with phrases you go, oh, that's a good way of describing it. Well, if you're communicating with that kind of a person, and you'll know you're communicating because they'll say, yeah, I hear you. Sounds good. And you'll go, okay. Now I know how to communicate with the person. You use all your metaphors from your sound systems. And you communicate with the person the same way as you talk French to a Frenchman. Spanish to a Spaniard. Now,
excuse me, that phrase, I hear you, is there also some technique that people study that uses that phrase more or less as a catchphrase?
No, it's a metaphor that people use to indicate I understand you. I understand and I hear you are cognitively, in terms of information, they both refer to the same aspect of reality. I do in fact understand what you're saying. But I could say I see, or I could say I hear you, or I got a handle on that. Those are all communicating the fact I understand, but they're understanding differently. One is understanding primarily through a sense of touch, through that system of processing information. One primarily visually, the other primarily through auditory channels. Yes?
But I think as a technique, though, feeding back that you're understanding what's going on is actually a kind of technique.
Yeah, well, I heard someone use it, and I'm trying to decide whether he does it himself, he does it with one person, or whether it is a technique he learned from some seminar such as this on a different method.
And in a lot of cases, you'll find that people will pick up a phrase, in a workshop, and they'll use the phrase without even thinking what it is. But when you're using a phrase like that, the only way you can understand a phrase, I hear you, is to go to that part of the brain which translates I hear you into what it means. Right? If you couldn't understand a word, if I say blark, you're going to go. If I say dog, you immediately know what part of your brain to go to and go, yeah, different kinds of dogs and so on. Likewise with the phrase I hear you. Now, I want to stay a little bit on schedule, so we're going to do one exercise in the afternoon. We're going to do the eye accessing exercise in the afternoon. Now you'll notice in the pages here, there's a segment. This is the part that you're going to go, oh, I knew part of this was something to caca. Because this is the part that seems, at first glance, it appears that it might not look right. You might experience some unclarity here, so don't worry about it. We'll go through this a little bit in the afternoon in terms of learning how to find out what accessing system a person's using. Now, before we go, I want to finish out two things, and this will take about 5 minutes. I want you to remember that rapport is built on matching, mirroring, pacing behaviors, right? Have we talked about rapport? I want you to be able to amplify this rapport. If you could get a little bit of rapport, you can amplify it, double it. If you can magnify it. Did you notice the phrase I used? Amplify is an auditory term. Magnify. It's a visual term. I want you to be able to intensify your rapport, and you do it by going to the sensory system that they're doing most of their thinking in. I want you to let them understand loud and clear that you're a sound thinker in tune with their experience. I want you to learn to think in each sensory language. There are different ways of experiencing it. We're totally different ways of processing information. I want you to be able to communicate fluently in the phrases and metaphors of the person you're talking to. Same way as speaking French is valuable if you want to live in France or Quebec. You do this, you will persuade. You'll vastly expand your abilities to see things from other people's point of views, to hear them with their ears, and to get a feel for them. I think you'll find that eye accessing cues, which is what we're going to talk about this afternoon, will allow you to know what sensory system somebody's in when they're using non-sensory terms like understanding, confusion, belief, evidence. I mean, those kind of words would not let you know what sensory systems a person uses, right? That's true. Well, the word true, which system would you go to? Depends on you. I-axis and cues will help you understand how to do that. We'll go into that a little bit in the afternoon, then we're going to move on to metaphors. Now, in A History of the Warfare Between Science and Theology and Christendom, it's a book written by Andrew Dickinson White years ago, showing how the church had historically dragged its feet at any attempt to bring human beings into civilization. But that's not just true of churches, it's equally true of institutions. White gives some really ugly examples of people who had already made up their minds. Some people who refuse to use their senses to freshly examine facts. I'm asking you to use your senses to freshly examine facts. I'm asking you to literally test what I'm telling you, not just today and tomorrow, but in all your encounters during the following weeks. The telescope, when it was first displayed in Europe, was thought by the church to be in league with the devil. They wouldn't look through it because they knew their senses deceived them. The microscope allowed man to stray from the fact that God, separation from God, was the cause of scourge and disease. And that perhaps when we had the bubonic plague, if we would pray in large groups where we could infect one another, the plague would go away. Give you an example. Ignaz Semmelweis was a doctor. He got the idea that germs cause infections, primarily women's death during childbirth. He came up with an idea that a mild chlorine solution to wash the hands. What they would do is they would dissect corpses back in time to learn about human anatomy. Then they go right from dissecting a corpse to delivering a baby. This is true. Frightening but true. They had a death rate at the hospital that Semmelweis worked at when he started there of 18%.
Mothers?
18% of all mothers died during childbirth. They didn't die of complications, they died of infections. Somehow or other, he started on the idea of cleaning your hands. Use a mild chlorine solution to get rid of the germs. He discovered this in 1848. The mortality rate under his supervision went from 18% to 1%. What's funny? 1848. 140 years ago. 12 years later, in the same clinic, 35% of all delivering mothers died because they were still cutting the corpses up and delivering the babies. Do you know why? Because Semmelweis was labeled a flake, a troublemaker, and he didn't run in the right circles. He didn't wear the right colored suit. It cost some of these women their life because people wouldn't accept an idea from the man with the wrong colored suit who didn't have the right credentials on the wall. You may be tempted to ignore some of the technology that I'm sharing with you, some that's stolen, some that invented by myself. You may be tempted to refuse to test it. There are going to be some of you who during the next week are going to use some of these techniques and some of these approaches. You're going to follow them. And you're going to see what happens when you use some stuff given to you by a fellow with no college degree, with a wrong colored suit, who's got part of his stuff highlighted by the customs, who has only one characteristic that I share in common with you. I'm curious, I'm immensely intelligent, and fat. And the fact that I really want to live in a free world. Semmelweis wanted to live in a world where women didn't have to die because of his errors. I would hate for the U.S. and Canada to be involved in another war because we didn't communicate the ideas. To drift further and further into a barbaric socialist state like Europe because we couldn't communicate the ideas. to be in a future where our children don't have an opportunity to set up their own business because they wouldn't kiss some bureaucrat's butt. The responsibility is ours because we are the independent variable in the math equation. We have the technology. We're the Semmelweisses who know how to prevent childbirth death. And that is one of the impacts of persuasion. Not death and taxes, but life, liberty.